Abraham Marcus Rosenberg was born on November 6, 1923 in Bardejov, Czechoslovakia. His parents were Anna Tannenbaum Rosenberg and Solomon Rosenberg. Marcus had one older brother, Emmanuel, known as Manny, and there are 3 children younger than Marcus, David, Erica, and the youngest, Aaron. Bardejov was a small scenic town in the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains. Nearly half of the 8,000 people living in the town at that time were Jewish. During the period after World War I, up to the eve of World War II, Czechoslovakia was a good place, a safe place for Jews to live. Jews were protected by the government from anti-Semitism. In fact, the country was so free at the time, it was given the nickname Little America. Marcus's parents owned a wholesale grocery store, and Marcus and his brother David began working there at a young age. Marcus proved himself to be an exceptionally trustworthy and mature, and when he was old enough, his parents gave him the responsibility of watching and handling the money with which they did business. Neither private schools nor parochial schools were allowed in the country, so all children, regardless of religion, went to school, state school, together. But before school and after school, Jewish boys went to the cheder, and on the weekends as well, to learn Torah. The girls went to their own religious schools. The Jewish children of Bardejov were also given opportunities to socialize together. The Mizrahi Zionist religious movement held gatherings where the children learned about the history of the Jewish homeland and sang Zionist songs. Marcus's brothers, Manny and David, and their sister Erica attended these get-togethers, but Marcus, he never did, because these get-togethers were co-ed, and Marcus was not comfortable with that. Instead, he went to meetings for a more traditional organization, Agudas Yisrael, where the boys studied Torah and sang in a choir. Marcus loved singing in the choir. In fact, for the entirety of his life, Marcus loved to sing. Marcus also loved studying Talmud and was recognized by his teachers as having a sharp mind and a natural talent for understanding the complexities of the rulings of business law. Marcus was fascinated with history as well, mostly European, and sought out learning about the individuals who effected changes in history. In October of 1938, everything changed in Czechoslovakia. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain appeased Germany by allowing them to annex the Sudetenland, the portion of Czechoslovakia that was predominantly ethnic German. Political chaos ensued when Slovakia declared autonomy. Slovakia aligned with Nazi Germany, and in 1939, virulently anti-Jewish laws, very similar to the German Nuremberg laws, were adopted. Marcus managed to finish 8th grade, but was not allowed to continue into secondary school. Jewish-owned businesses became nationalized, meaning that the ownership of these businesses were handed over to non-Jews. Luckily for the Rosenbergs, the new owner of their store was someone who they'd had a long and respectful business relationship with. He allowed the Rosenbergs to stay on and manage the day-to-day affairs of the business. It was this same non-Jewish man who, at great risk to his own life, later saved Marcus and his brother David from deportation during Passover in March of 1942. The Nazis ramped up their efforts to deport Slovakia's Jews. The Jewish communities around the country began to panic. Many Jews fled into Hungary. Others hid in the surrounding woods, and some tried to obtain special certificates of exemption that would allow them to avoid deportation. These certificates were granted only to those Jews deemed essential to the country's economy. During this time period, Marcus was very focused on how to best protect his family. The Rosenbergs had relatives in America who were desperately trying to get them out of Europe, but obtaining visas at that time was impossible. Fleeing to Hungary, where they had no family, or to Poland, which was occupied by the Nazis, were not options either. Only the certificates of exemption seemed like a possibility, but in reality, this was a very long shot at best, because the Rosenbergs' grocery business was the smallest of the wholesale grocers in town. But this did not stop Marcus from trying, and through his ingenuity, and initiative and connections, the family did indeed obtain that certificate. Out of 4,000 Jews in Bardyav, only 150 were granted this special exemption. The others began being forcibly removed from their homes and deported to Poland just a few weeks later in May of 1942. There are many twists and turns in the story of the Rosenberg family during this period, but ultimately, with the exception of Marcus's sister Erica, all of the other family members were deported to Auschwitz, the notorious death camp in Poland. Both of Marcus's parents, as well as the youngest brother, Aaron, were tragically murdered in the gas chambers soon upon arrival in October of 1944. Marcus arrived in Auschwitz about a month before that, in September of 1944. He did hard labor in the camp until he was moved to Germany to a slave labor camp. He witnessed many unspeakable atrocities. On April 28th, he and his fellow prisoners were liberated by the British Army. At the time of liberation, Marcus weighed less than 90 pounds. After being nursed back to health in a DP camp in Germany, Marcus made his way back to his hometown of Bardyav. 3 of his siblings, Manny, David, and Erica, also survived and returned home as well. They were all reunited, and they tried very hard to put the tragedies of the recent past years behind them. They started a new business, and they began helping to rebuild Jewish life in the city, with new religious schools and synagogues sprouting up. And even though Marcus's own personal religious outlook had changed because of the horrific experiences he endured, he was determined not to give up on Jewish life. Just a few short years later, the communists took over the country, creating a new political system of fascism. Eventually, all of the Rosenberg siblings ended up leaving Europe and finally immigrating to America. It was in Dallas, specifically, where Marcus and his 2 brothers, Manny and David, settled. In Dallas, they had an aunt and uncle who helped them acclimate to their new country. It was in Dallas where they ultimately set up their unimaginably successful wholesale business, Aero Industries. It was Dallas where they finally settled down and began their families. And it was here, of all places, where they would bring their Jewish influences from their old world into the new world. Marcus met the beautiful Ann Pappenheim in the Catskills of upstate New York, where they were both vacationing. Ann was going out with one of Marcus's friends, but thankfully that relationship did not work out. Marcus then called Ann to see if she would go on a date with him, and she agreed. Marcus had broken his arm playing volleyball while on vacation, so he ended up staying in New York longer than initially planned. The timing was fortuitous because he and Ann got to know each other much better during this period. When Marcus returned to Dallas, their relationship continued, and on July 29th, 1956, they were married in New York. After the newlyweds settled in Dallas, they began their family. First Helen, then Stephen. 3 more daughters followed, Margot, Lizzie, and Sherry. In the fall of 1960, Ann informed Marcus that their then 3-year-old daughter Helen would need to start preschool soon, and that preschool she was going to go to was going to be a Jewish school. Marcus was completely on board, but there was one tiny little problem. There was no Jewish school in Dallas. A few years before, the only Jewish day school that had been in Dallas, the Hillel Academy, had shut their doors because the community did not support it, and the school could not pay its teachers. The majority of Dallas's Jewish community at that time was very secular and not interested at all in a Jewish day school. Once again, the odds were against Marcus in so many ways, but as we know, Marcus was never one to give up. Despite the lack of interest and the lack of funding in the community, Marcus did indeed find a way to open a Jewish school in Dallas. He worked with Torah Umasora to hire the school's first principal, Rabbi Mendel Bernstein. Together they began to raise community awareness of the school and sought to recruit children to attend. Their initial efforts were not particularly fruitful. Marcus would go door to door to people's homes, and when they would open the door to him, they'd say, "Oh, Marcus, we don't have any money to give to your school." And Marcus would always reply, "I don't want your money, I want your children. I want your children to have a Jewish education so they'll stay Jewish." It seems that Marcus came out of Auschwitz struggling with serious questions about God. Yet he was profoundly silent about that period in his life and the impact that the war had on his personal theology. But he did not live his life trapped in doubt, and he did not occupy himself with theological questions. He still loved being Jewish and was fully committed to doing all he could to give children a strong Jewish education and identity. The best way for Marcus to dull the pain that was in his heart was to give back to others, and in large part, he did this by obligating himself to the next generation. For him, the most important thing was that Jewish children possess the knowledge of what Judaism is and what it stands for, so that Jewish values would serve as their moral compass and guide them throughout their life. Marcus indeed had a vision for the school. The formula was pretty straightforward. First, the school would need to have excellent teachers and be academically rigorous, both in Jewish studies and general studies. Second, the school would teach about Jewish heritage and instill a deep pride in Judaism. And third, the school was to be open and welcoming to families of all levels of observance. You know, Marcus was actually modern Orthodox before modern Orthodoxy was even really a thing. Determined not to repeat the same mistakes of the defunct Hillel Academy, Marcus worked tirelessly for Akiba to ensure that it would take root, succeed, and be sustainable for future generations. Marcus put so much of himself into the school, but the school's success was never about Marcus. Every ounce of effort he put into the school was for the benefit of the children. Eventually, all of Marcus's hard work bore fruit. When Akiba Academy opened its doors in September of 1962, the school had 3 teachers and 23 students. Tuition was, hang on, $300 a year. The school's annual budget was $28,000, and the school building was a 2-bedroom home, 20 feet wide and 50 feet long, giving the students and faculty about 1,000 square feet in which to operate. Flash forward 60 years to today, and the differences, they're pretty amazing. Think about a school with 23 students and 1,000 square feet, and look at this beautiful campus we now have. And think about the many thousands of Jewish children who have passed through the doors of Akiba over the years, whose foundational education was provided here to both observant and lesser observant families, families who recognize and are grateful for all that Akiba provided for their children. So many of these students have gone on to achieve great things in the world. Some have even returned to Dallas to begin their own families. Do you know at this specific moment in time, Akiba has 37 second-generation students and 6 third-generation students. My own kids were second-generation students. Clearly, something about this school resonates for all of the former students who have brought and continue to bring their children to Akiba for their educational experience. Akiba forever changed the face of Jewish Dallas. In very profound ways, this little day school that started out in a 2-bedroom house was a catalyst for the other day schools and other Orthodox institutions that would follow. Through Marcus's determination and strong will, the Jewish Federation voted to financially support a Jewish school. This too was a groundbreaking and monumental achievement, and this support from the Federation carried over to all the Jewish schools that have developed in our city. Jewish Dallas continues to grow and grow. Akiba Academy was truly Marcus's single greatest legacy to this community. Marcus was a survivor. He was brilliant and determined. He had an incredible work ethic, and he was a force to be reckoned with. He labored day and night for his business and for the Dallas Jewish community. He never painted himself as a victim, and he would say that as long as he could breathe, as long as he could do, he knew he had choices and could find solutions. That's the mindset that gave him the freedom and the strength to survive and thrive. I haven't spoken at all about Marcus's founding of Congregation Shari Tefillah, or the unbelievably successful business that he and his brother David founded and built from the ground up. I haven't touched on so many of Marcus's other accomplishments today, but it is plain to see that Marcus spent his life planting and building. Everything he touched, it grew. His family, his business, the Jewish community, all of it grew. On February 18, 2005, Marcus passed away. At his burial, both the founding rabbi of Congregation Shari Tefillah, Rabbi Wolk, and his successor, Rabbi Pearl, eulogized Marcus. Rabbi Wolk acknowledged that Marcus knew the only way to ensure the survival of future generations was through the continued study of Judaism's holy texts, noting that Marcus had enabled thousands of Jewish and boys and girls to learn Torah. He said that Marcus understood that without Jewish education, a spiritual devastation would befall our people. Rabbi Pearl likened Marcus to the biblical patriarch Jacob, who planted trees on the outskirts of Egypt while on the way to reunite with his son Joseph. Those trees were not for Jacob, but for his ancestors who hundreds of years later would be freed from slavery and leave Egypt for the promised land. Rabbi Pearl said that, like Jacob, Marcus had an incredible capacity to envision the future of our community long before most were ready for his vision, and even in the face of those who actively worked against it. And like Jacob, when Marcus planted trees, it wasn't so he could taste the fruit himself. Marcus planted for his children, for his grandchildren, and for the Jewish people. May his memory always be for a blessing.